The first thing you feel is the heat. Not from fire, from the breath of 1,000 horses charging straight at you, shaking the wet earth under your boots like a living drum. You are not one of them. You are not perched on a saddle, silk banners streaming behind you, your family crest fluttering like a dare. You're standing in mud up to the ankle, hands trembling around a matchlock, a wooden tube, a burning cord, and the hope that timing beats bloodline. Across the field, the Takeda clan, the most feared cavalry in Japan, comes down the slope like a painted storm. Lords in lacquered armor, samurai born to charge, a tradition older than the walls behind you. They believe speed is destiny. They believe your fence of sharpened stakes is an insult. And they believe 3,000 ashigaru, foot soldiers with smoky, clumsy guns, cannot stop 10,000 horsemen trained since childhood to kill at a gallop. The rain hisses, powder cakes, your fuse sputters. A matchlock takes 20 steps to load, and every one feels like a prayer with dirty hands. And still they come. A river seals your left, deep enough to drown a slipping horse, narrow enough to tempt a charge. A 2-kilometer line of wooden palisades anchors your front, crude, uneven, ugly, but built exactly where they need to be. Behind them stands Nobunaga's system. Not men, not guns, a system. Rows rotating fire, groups moving like clockwork, the rhythm of a factory hidden inside an army. The cavalry expects glory. You expect impact. What happens instead is silence, the tight breath before the trigger breaks. The first volley erupts like a slap across the field. Horses scream, samurai blink through splinters, and for the first time in their lives, momentum betrays them. Because today is the morning when tradition meets physics, when honor on horseback runs into timing, terrain, and gunpowder math. This is Nagashino, the field where the old world rides in at full speed and stops dead at a wooden fence. You've grown up hearing one rule: the horse decides the fight. A mounted samurai is more than a warrior, he's a declaration. Lamellar plates glinting, silk cords flowing, his personal banner rising above the dust like a signature written in speed. A charge isn't just force, it's hierarchy made visible. The brave close, the skilled cut, the quick survive. So why are you, ashigaru, low-born infantry, standing behind a fence instead of riding toward glory? Your weapon isn't a legacy sword blessed by a line of ancestors, it's a matchlock, a Portuguese invention barely decades old in Japan, a wooden stock with an iron barrel and a smoldering cord that lowers onto a powder pan to fire. It jams, it hates rain, it takes forever to load. Everything about it looks like the opposite of honor. And yet here you are, staring past angled stakes at cavalry bred to break armies, while you fuse powder and timing together with hands that won't stop shaking. To your right, a river presses against the flank, a natural wall. To your front, the ground is soaked, heavy, perfect for pulling speed out of charging horses. And stretching across 2 kilometers is a palisade called babosaku. Not a fortress wall, but a deliberately crude line of jagged wooden stakes set at shifting angles. It looks random. It's anything but. Those gaps? They're invitations, funnels, mouths that guide horses into kill lanes where matchlocks don't need accuracy, only rhythm. A cavalry charge needs a clean run, the kind of open field where 10,000 hooves become thunder. Here, the mud steals the spring from each stride, the river steals the flank, the fence steals the angle, and Nobunaga steals the timing. Because that's the secret, not the guns, the system around them. A single matchlock can't stop a charging samurai. One shot is just noise. But 10 shots in sequence, spaced a breath apart, is drag. Like a row of invisible doors closing one after another, each taking a little more momentum from the horse, a little more nerve from the rider. The first row fires. Before their smoke drifts, the second row ignites. Before that sound dies, a third steps forward. Older documents call it 3-tier volley fire. Modern analysis suggests teams of 3 operating in rotating microcycles. It almost doesn't matter. The effect is the same. The line never goes silent. Your fuse hisses. You measure powder with numb fingers. You ram the ball, tap the wad, prime the pan. While you do, the man beside you raises his gun and fires into the same funnel you just cleared. And behind him, another primes his cord, waiting for his beat. It feels like a drum line. Not one drummer keeping time, but a section. No single hero, no single duel, a machine made of men. Smoke thickens into a white curtain. Horses hate it. They smell fire, hear cracks, and lose sight of the rails they need to jump. The fence becomes a workbench. You can rest your barrel to steady your aim, then step back to reload while the next gunner takes your place. What stops the cavalry isn't the shot, it's the rhythm. The refusal to leave silence, even for one heartbeat, where a horse can surge through. A samurai charge is built on shock. Speed becomes fear. Fear becomes hesitation. Hesitation becomes defeat. But rhythm kills shock. The air never goes still long enough for courage to catch up. Gaps collapse, openings shut all at once. Every second a horse hesitates at the stakes is one more second that brings another volley. The first riders push in, expecting to carve through. They hit angled stakes that twist hooves and stirrups. They lose speed. They bunch. And the machine behind the fence eats that lost speed shot by shot. For the first time, the most elite warriors on the field realize the truth. Skill cannot close what timing refuses to open. And standing in the mud, breathing in smoke and fear, with a matchlock barrel hot enough to burn your palms, you feel something you did not expect. The old world is ending right in front of you. Not with a clash of swords, but with a rhythm. You only see the fence. You only hear the guns. You only feel the rhythm. But what keeps that rhythm alive isn't at the front. It's the machine humming behind you. The part of a battle most people never imagine. The part that never makes it into scrolls or heroic songs. Because matchlocks don't run on courage. They run on math. Powder, lead, dry wicks, cartloads of cartridges wrapped in oiled paper, boys sprinting back and forth with fresh match cords glowing inside clay pots, fieldsmiths waiting with ladles and molds to recast shot on the spot. None of this looks glorious. None of it looks samurai. But if these pieces fail, even once, the line collapses, the rhythm dies, and cavalry takes back the world it understands. For centuries, Japanese warfare hinged on personal valor. Riders calling each other out by name, duels witnessed and remembered, and entire battles decided by the few men bold enough to carve a gap in the enemy's line. But guns changed the physics of the field. Not because they were powerful. Early matchlocks were finicky, slow, and often unreliable, but because they required a supply chain instead of a hero. That's the quiet revolution Nobunaga saw before anyone else. Behind the palisade, out of arrow range, sits a caravan that looks more like a mobile marketplace than an army train. Ox-drawn wagons wrapped in cloth, chests of powder sealed with wax, barrels lined with lacquer to keep the rain out, bundles of wicks dried over charcoal pans, baskets of cartridges tucked under reed mats. The sound of battle drowns the clatter of wheels, because every axle is wrapped in fabric to stay silent. Runners move like nervous bees, in and out of the smoke, carrying powder flasks, lead shot, spare cords. This is not improvisation. This is design. Modern metallurgical studies of the lead recovered at Nagashino show something astonishing. The shot doesn't come from one source. It comes from many. Japanese mines, Korean trade routes, South China suppliers, even smelting networks stretching toward Thailand. That kind of variety only appears in one situation. A commander with long-distance contracts, coin to pay fast, and the organizational reach to pull foreign material across seas, rivers, mountain passes, merchant leagues, and local clans. Nobunaga didn't buy guns. He bought continuity. He built a system where running out of powder was more dangerous than enemy blades. Powder goes damp, there's more under oiled cloth. A match cord blows out in the wind. A boy is already behind you with a fresh coil glowing at the tip. A gun fouls from heavy use. A smith heats a pick and clears the vent. A gunner's cartridge pouch empties. A runner switches it out and is gone before the next volley lands. You're part of a chain, a long, intricate organism made of hands and timing, where failure at one point starves everyone else. This is why Nobunaga's fire never sputters, why the line never goes quiet, why the volley system doesn't collapse the way it does in other armies who copied the idea but not the infrastructure. The Takeda clan also brought firearms, but they couldn't bring this. Their powder stocks ran thin, their nitrates ran out. Their lead was stretched to the point that warriors melted copper coins into makeshift bullets, soft and misshapen, that deformed in the barrel and bled accuracy. Their guns barked, Nobunaga's sustained. And the moment the rhythm behind the fence stabilized, the outcome ahead of it began to tilt. Because cavalry only wins if it reaches you fast, only wins if timing breaks, only wins if the line hesitates. But the line does not hesitate. Not once. The Takeda cavalry prepares anyway, because the code demands they do. The charge. You can feel the shift before you see it. A deep vibration through the mud, a murmur rolling through the riders massed on the opposite slope, banners tilting forward like blades cutting the rain-heavy air. They're coming. 10,000 horsemen, the pride of a clan famous for breeding cavalry the way others breed legend, begin their push through the downpour. The Takeda have to break your line, not because it's smart, but because their entire system is built on shock. A cavalry charge is a statement, a ritual, a promise between lord and warrior. Ride, close, break them, earn your place. Even the weather seems on their side. Rain favors the horse, wet powder, slippery cords, heavier air that smothers flame. If there was ever a morning when old traditions should triumph, it is this one. The first units begin to descend. Hooves splash, leather groans. Riders lower yari lances, long bamboo-shafted spears designed to hit with the force of a falling tree. The entire slope becomes a moving wall of lacquered armor and red banners emblazoned with Takeda Shingen's war sigil. They expect to smash you. They expect to earn glory. They expect your fence to give way under pressure. They do not expect math. The mud steals their first stride, just enough to rob the horses of lift, just enough to dull the spring needed for a clean jump over the stakes. They don't notice at first, but cavalry lives on seconds, and the mud has taken some. The fence will take more. The first riders angle toward a gap between stakes. That gap exists on purpose, a funnel disguised as a weakness. a mouth carved into the fence to pull riders exactly where guns are aimed. Hooves slip, horses bunch. A stirrup catches a stake, twists a knee, snaps formation. What was supposed to be a spear point becomes a knot. Then, crack! The first volley slams into the funnel. The horses rear back from the flash. The air bursts into splinters torn off the stakes. Rain turns to white steam as hot barrels fire again and again. A few riders still push. They always do. Tradition compels them. But the second volley lands before the first horse can even clear the debris of the stakes. And the third volley hits high. Shoulders, helmets, arms raised in reflex instead of aim. The charge slows. When cavalry slows, it dies. A key Takeda commander takes 3 shots through the armor plates of his cuirass. He pushes forward anyway, because that is his role. But when he finally falls from the saddle, it does more than break a body. It breaks a lineage of momentum. Riders behind him falter, unsure whether to fill the gap or hold formation. They hesitate, a tiny pause. But tiny pauses are the cracks that volley fire pours into. Orders vanish in the rain. Voices can't reach through the fog of smoke. What should be a wedge becomes a scattering of individuals trying to force a charge that no longer exists. Horses know before riders do. They stamp, they sidestep, they refuse. Herd animals don't charge smoke and noise. They turn from it. Riders fight that turn with voice and rein, but the rhythm is stronger. Each continuous volley pushes the cavalry further into hesitation, and hesitation is the one enemy speed cannot outrun. A few riders who manage to slip through the gaps look around and realize something horrifying. There is no mass behind them, no wedge, no momentum, just a fence they barely crossed and a machine they cannot reach. They pull up, not in fear, in confusion. They were trained for duels, but duels do not exist in this smoke. There is no enemy champion, no name to call out, only a pan flash, a hiss, and a faceless gunner doing his job in rhythm. This isn't a clash, it's a disassembly, a dismantling of an entire way of war. The cavalry hasn't just failed to break the fence has broken them. And as the volleys continue, as the machine keeps its beat, as the smoke thickens and the riders pull back in disbelief, one truth settles across the field like ash. Speed lost to seconds. Honor lost to order. Tradition lost to a system that refused to let silence in. This is the morning the samurai learned the world had changed, and it would not change back. The guns finally quiet. Not because the ashigaru stop firing, but because there is no one left close enough to shoot. What remains of the Takeda cavalry pulls back into the rain, not in formation, not in defiance, but in something far older and heavier: bewilderment. You can feel that emotion hanging in the mist, the same way heat lingers after lightning splits a tree. It isn't just defeat, it's confusion at a world that no longer behaves the way they were taught. For centuries, the hierarchy of war was simple. The horseman stands above, the infantry below. Status was height, worth was proximity. You proved yourself with a gallop, a duel, a banner raised in the spray of mud and sweat. But today, there were no duels, no names shouted, no signature strokes, just a rhythm behind a fence, a sound that erased identity. A volley that didn't see lineage or silk or prestige. It saw only targets, lined up by the same code that once made them untouchable. Imagine one Takeda retainer, his sashimono, The bright square of cloth bearing his clan and status hangs soaked and torn. He had spent years tying that banner with reverence, believing the world would recognize and respect it. But today he held it high, and the only response was a flash, a hiss, and a crack from a rail. The matchlock didn't bow to his rank. It didn't wait for him to declare his name. It didn't honor the old pact between warrior and witness. It simply fired. These men didn't just lose a battle. They lost the story they believed they lived inside. And when a story collapses, the people who carried it must decide whether to cling to its broken pieces or adapt to the shape of the world that just shattered it. In the smoke rising over Nagashino, you can see the birth of something quietly revolutionary. Not because the samurai vanished, they didn't, but because the meaning of samurai had to change. Value could no longer be proven in a straight-line charge. Honor could no longer be measured by whose horse reached the enemy first. Courage could no longer be displayed in a duel that only one side recognized. Nagashino rewrote the right. Look at the ashigaru behind the fence. These were men who grew up cutting rice, not enemies. Men without pedigree, without banners. Men whose ancestors would never have dreamed of meeting mounted elites in open ground. Yet here they stand, holding the line not through individual brilliance, but through coordinated motion. The kind of courage you express by not breaking rank when every instinct tells you to run. Their bravery is not loud. It is disciplined. It is quiet. It is repeated. And today, it was decisive. This is the real innovation, the shift from honor as spectacle to honor as collective duty. A battlefield where survival depends on drills, timing, cover, supply, and an understanding of terrain. This is what later ages call modern combat. This is why Nagashino is remembered not for new weapons, but for a new world view. The ripples do not stay on the field. They move into courts, into councils, into the halls where daimyo trace maps and reconsider everything they thought they understood. News spreads quickly. An army of elite riders broken by peasants holding smoky tubes behind a wooden rail. And the reaction is not disbelief, it is urgency. Scrolls arrive in castle towns, reports circulate, whispers travel with merchants. Nobunaga used 3,000 guns. He built fences in layers. The volleys never stopped. His powder never ran out. He won without risking his cavalry. The narrative hardens fast. This wasn't a trick. This was a template. And in Japan's Sengoku era, a world defined by constant conflict, anything that wins becomes something others will copy. Daimyo who once boasted of their mounted retainers now discuss trade routes and saltpeter supplies. Men who used to idolize duels now study reload cycles. Carpenters are summoned to draw palisade lines. Smiths begin casting locks, springs, and barrels instead of only swords. This is when you can see the real cultural shift. Power moves from the individual to the institution, from the horseman to the unit, from the duel to the drill, from spectacle to structure. But systems don't bleed, people do. Look again at the Takeda riders who lived through the morning. Their armor hangs heavy with rain, their lances are cracked, their horses tremble more from noise memory than exhaustion. They came expecting glory, they leave carrying doubt. Because what do you do when the world changes faster than you can swing a blade? What do you hold on to when the symbol of your status, the charge, becomes suicide? What happens to a proud warrior identity when the field refuses to respect it? This is the wound of Nagashino, a tearing of tradition that doesn't show up in casualty counts. And yet, Every era that changes does so through pain. Through the moment a culture realizes its past can't explain its present. Through the shock that forces adaptation. The samurai didn't disappear. They evolved. They became officers who coordinated fire and movement. They commanded mixed units. They learned the angles of fences, the timing of volleys, the cost of silence. The horse remained, but its role shifted from hammer to hook, from frontline breaker to flanker, pursuer, finisher. Honor did not die, it migrated. Nagashino did not end the samurai age. It ended the illusion that courage could outrun coordinated fire. Within a generation, guns were everywhere. Fortifications grew teeth. Battles became puzzles solved with layers, timing, and logistics. The shift echoed across the archipelago. Castles redesigned, armies reorganized, trade routes fortified, powder contracts signed with urgency bordering on panic. In this world, victory belonged not to the boldest rider, but to the lord who understood systems. Nagashino didn't erase heroism, it reframed it. Courage became the willingness to hold a line under fire. Honor became discipline. Status became responsibility. Glory became coordination. Even the horsemen who survived would eventually fight in this new style, because survival, not nostalgia, shapes the future. This is why the battle remains iconic. Not because of the guns, not because of the fence, but because it showed in one morning how quickly a world can turn when someone stops worshipping tradition and starts engineering outcomes. Two forces met at Nagashino. One built on centuries of ritual, the other built in a few months of planning. Only one had time on its side. Only one had systems that didn't break. Only one saw the battlefield for what it was becoming. And once Japan saw that, it could never unsee it. When the smoke thins and the rain settles into the churned mud of Nagashino, what remains is not just the memory of a battle, but the outline of a new world. Thousands of hoofprints fade into puddles, broken match cords lie in the grass, splintered fence posts lean like tired survivors. And somewhere out there, between the last puff of matchlock smoke and the shiver running through the horses that fled, you can feel the shift. Japan just stepped into modern war. Not because guns existed, they had for decades, but because someone finally asked the real question. What if battle isn't about who is braver, but who is better at shaping time? Oda Nobunaga didn't win because the samurai were weak. He won because he stopped worshipping the charge and started engineering the rhythm. He turned mud into a weapon. He turned fences into funnels. He turned low-born ashigaru into a machine. And he turned the matchlock, a clumsy, smoky, unreliable tool, into a spine that never broke. Every society has its cherished stories. Every warrior class believes its rituals are eternal. Every culture thinks its old rules still apply. Until a morning arrives where those rules don't matter. Nagashino is that morning. The moment when skill loses to system, individual valor loses to coordinated timing, the duel loses to the volley, prestige loses to preparedness. And in that shift is the rule we carry forward, not just for war, but for every place where tradition meets change. When slow, honorable decline is guaranteed, the only sane choice is the sharp, engineered risk. That's the usable lesson. The samurai didn't lose because they were outdated. They lost because they relied on a story that no longer matched the world. Nobunaga didn't win because he broke tradition. He won because he replaced it with a system built for reality, not memory. So here's the question that survives the battle, survives the generals, survives the centuries. Where in your life are you charging out of habit, when you should be building a fence and firing in rhythm? And where is the moment, the single engineered moment, that turns your weakness into a system that wins? Drop your take in the comments. Subscribe for the next deep dive, because this wasn't just a battle story. This was the morning courage met coordination, and the future won.